What's up guys? Today, I'm going to be talking about Legion's next patch, 7.1.5. At BlizzCon, game director Ian Hazzikostas laid out a pretty solid roadmap for the next couple of patches in Legion, and 7.1.5 is the first one we're going to be getting. This is a smaller patch, much like 6.2.3, so it's not going to feature a lot of content, no new dungeons, no new raids, nothing along those lines. Still, it will have more content than 6.1. First up are the new micro-holidays. Like their name implies, these are mini-holiday events. Unlike something like Hallow's End or the Lunar Festival, there aren't any achievements or mounts or titles or pets attached to these. There's far less incentive pushing you to do them. The act of doing them is supposed to be where all the fun is, not finally finishing some ridiculous achievement like School of Hard Knocks or something. They gave some examples of micro-holidays, one of which was Encourage Remembrance Day, and this is where Alliance and Horde could compete in an event in Silithus during one day of the year, and whichever faction wins will have their flag hanging up by the AQ gates for the next year. A lot of these holidays are like this. Having your faction's flag in Silithus is clearly not a big deal, but the competition between the factions should be pretty fun. Another example they gave is the Volunteer Guard Day, where saluting a guard lets you take on their appearance and defend the city from hostile NPCs. My favorite micro-holiday is the Hatching of the Hippogriffs Day, where if you go to Feralus on a certain day of the year, you can watch the baby hippogriffs hatch, and you'll be able to get a baby hippogriff of your own that perches on you just like Pepe. It sounds pretty cute to me. The last one that was mentioned is the Thousand Needles Boat Day, which they didn't give very much information on, but it was described as Azeroth Spring Break. I'm not exactly sure what that entails, but I did always like the Flooded Thousand Needles. I thought it was a pretty cool variation on the original zone, so it would be cool to hang out there once a year. I'm sure that those aren't all of the micro-holidays they're planning. I mean, the whole point is to have a ton of these sort of fun, wacky, minor events that just add more to the world. I think it's really a great idea that makes day-to-day gameplay just a little bit more fresh. Patch 7.1.5 will also add in Mists of Pandaria dungeons to the time walking system. They say that time walking is a good example of evergreen content, which is content that never really gets old. Even as other content comes and goes, there's always some value there. There's always some people who will enjoy doing that older stuff. So the dungeons that they're adding are Temple of the Jade Servant, Stormstout Brewery, Shadowpan Monastery, Gate of the Setting Sun, Mogishan Palace, and Siege of Nizhao Temple. So this means we're still lacking some of the ones that were updated for Mists, both of the Scarlets as well as Scholomance. And personally, I would have preferred those to Gate of the Setting Sun and Siege of Nizhao Temple, but I suppose it's good just to add more dungeons into the system overall to keep it interesting, even if they are adding some terrible ones. It was also mentioned that time walking will probably never feature dungeons from the last expansion, meaning that nobody really wants to play through the Warlord's dungeons right now, but they might in a year or two. I actually really liked some of the Warlord's dungeons, especially Auchindoun, but I agree that right now it's a little too soon to add them into the mix. This patch will also introduce a new season for the Brawlers Guild, which has been closed since the end of Warlords. The new season will introduce tons of new bosses, along with a new feature called Rumbles, which will occasionally trigger and pull spectators into the arena to take on a raid boss together. There's a new currency called Brawler's Gold, which provides shared benefits for the Brawlers, like a graveyard next to the arena for a quicker corpse run back to the brawls, and it can also be used to purchase other rewards. As always, there are quite a few shirts being added, although really, none of them can ever hope to top Precious's ribbon, so I don't know why they even try. And finally, if you were wondering where that data-mined Basilisk mount comes from, it looks like it's going to be a Brawler's Guild reward as well. I think it's a pretty cool mount, definitely better than the old Mushan. Like the Nagrand Arena, the old Blade's Edge map is going to get a fresh coat of paint. There aren't going to be any gameplay changes here, because it's already pretty well designed. It just looks pretty old, so they're going to go in and retexture it, have some new assets there, and I think that's a pretty great change. Even more importantly, it was also mentioned that arenas are now going to have voiced announcers to call out some events, and I think that is really awesome. I've been wanting announcers in WoW PvP for years. It just adds flavor, if nothing else. The biggest part of this patch is going to be the class updates. Part of this is tweaking and rebalancing talents. Too many specs have fallen into the familiar issue where everyone has the same setup about 95% of the time, and there's just not enough variation for engaging gameplay. So Blizzard's going to take a look at some of the overperforming talents and probably tune them down, and probably buff up some of the weaker or less picked talents. They're also going to be looking at secondary stats, because they want them to be more balanced and of relatively equal value regardless of your class. You shouldn't end up with a higher item level piece of gear, but not want to wear it because it has haste instead of mastery or something. That just doesn't feel very good. They feel that if an item has a higher item level, it should usually be an upgrade. The secondary stats shouldn't make it significantly worse for your spec. This change is a long time coming, and overall, I think it's pretty great. I know that some people like the idea of lower item level gear being viable in the right context, but I think that it's just such an opaque thing that just confuses a lot of people who don't play at the top level. You would intuitively expect a higher item level piece of gear to just be better, so I think they should try and get the game to a spot where that's true more often. Additionally, they're also going to be bringing back and adding some new utility skills. Basically, they heard the feedback loud and clear that they went too far in terms of ability pruning in Warlords, and even more so in Legion. Now that they've scaled back the number of abilities, they can look at adding some of them back in and even making new ones to better fit the class fantasy. I really miss a lot of the more niche abilities. I thought that a lot of them added a lot of flavor, or sometimes were even useful every now and then. I never quite bought their excuse that people got confused by having too many abilities somehow. Sure, rotation can be too complex, but I don't think 2 or 3 fun, rarely used spells per class would cause any problems. Anyway, it's good to see that they've heard the feedback and are making some adjustments. Some of the specific things they mentioned are things like hunter traps. They feel that only allowing survival hunters to have traps was a pretty big mistake, and I agree. I mean, traps have been part of every hunter spec since forever, so it ended up making the other specs feel like less of a hunter rather than making survival feel any better. One of the other abilities that was mentioned is Shroud of Concealment, which is coming back for rogues in this patch as well. And those examples all seem pretty cool, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what other abilities they have in mind. I'm pretty curious to see. In terms of release date, the 7.1.5 PTR should be coming out pretty soon, so it'll likely be live in a month or maybe 2. Like I said, this patch is pretty minor though. The real stuff is going to come in the next patch, which is 7.2, and I'll make another video talking about that one in particular. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, please leave a like, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.